Transformers is a franchise that has survived 40 years of some very high highs and some very pathetic lows. But where did it all begin? Obviously, Diaclone, the toys, and blah 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 blah, but we all know Transformers would not be what it is today if it was just that. The cartoon had a massive role to play in Transformers' popularity. And the first thing you see is Wheeljack and Bumblebee in their Cybertronian alt modes. Of course, a little bit later, you see Jazz in his Cybertronian mode. For 37 years, those were the only appearances of those particular looks. They never appeared outside of that episode much, and there were never official toys made of those. But all of that changed with Transformers' buzzworthy Bumblebee. And that brings us to today's subject, Transformers Origins Bumblebee, Jazz, and Wheeljack. This review was honestly supposed to be out quite a bit ago, but my Wheeljack broke while filming, so I had to wait to get another one. So, without further ado, let's get into Bumblebee first. This Bumblebee figure is absolute gold. He's just a small yellow bean, but he has a lot of really nice detail. The round shape of the helmet and the face, coupled with that little smirk, just gives him so much of that good Bumblebee personality. And honestly, that yellow lends itself really well to looking at the sculpted detail on this guy. While I'm not the biggest fan of the painted windows on his chest or the Autobot badge with no outline, it doesn't that bad. While I'm not the biggest fan of the painted windows and the Auto badge with no outline, it doesn't look that bad. And right underneath it is a really nice hit of gunmetal gray. These are very G1 Bumblebee-esque, and same with the forearms. I always kinda loved the rimmed look to biceps on some Transformers, I don't know why. You even get some sculpting on his crotch, and some very nice sculpting all the way down to his feet. I love how they made the feet look like the VW Bug Earth Mode equivalent. Yes, it is true that this figure has quite a bit of kibble, but it really doesn't ruin it in any major way. While the backpack isn't the worst thing I ever seen, it's definitely not very pretty to look at. If it really bothered you that much, it's not connected to the body by a metal pin, so you can just take it off. Even on the legs, the kibble isn't that bad. Except for one instance, which we'll get into with articulation. Now, moving on from Bumblebee, let's take a look at Jazz. This figure is easily my favorite out of the trio. I think the head sculpt is reused from the 86 Jazz, but for some reason the paint they used here makes it look way better. I love that they mimicked the porch. I really love how they gave him the Porsche chest. It helps him fit in with other figures way better. And I love that the headlights are translucent blue. The sculpting here is absolutely phenomenal as well. I love everything here, from the lines of his arms to the vent detail on his crotch. Even the toes have two different shades of gray on them. I didn't mention it with Bumblebee, but all these figures have thigh fillers. Here you might start seeing a running theme with these figures. And of course it is the kibble. But again, I don't think it's that bad here. The legs, in my opinion, are a little bit too chunky, but they are workable. I think if the spoiler could just collapse a little bit more, I'd be happy. This Jazz figure is definitely one of the best of all time. But of course, that's not it, so let's bring in Wheeljack. Wheeljack here has been on my list since Siege. And honestly, I'm glad I had to wait for it. This figure is so much better than it would have been if it came out in Siege. This guy's head sculpt is absolutely immaculate for Wheeljack. Honestly, there's not a single thing I would change about it. Wheeljack's iconic fins should definitely be longer than this, and I think they should have definitely painted him at least. I love the seafoam green that they used for the windshield chest, but again, we're 0 for 3 on auto badges with no outline. Give it like a white or black or even silver outline, it makes it pop so much more. So you get under there and there is a bunch of amazing sculpted detail. The arms, the hips, the thighs all have this immaculate amount of panel lining detail. While there's not too much paint on this guy, the paint that is here does stand out pretty good. But at this point, you all know what I'm about to say. The backpack on this figure is the worst out of all of the Origins figures. Like, this amount of backpack is absolutely ungodly. And it should, keyword should, really annoy me. To a certain extent, I guess it does, but there is a reason for it, which we'll get into in vehicle mode. Honestly, the backpack isn't the worst part, it's the legs. They're way too chunky and just don't want to tab in. And it's been like that on both of the copies I've had. If the backpack wasn't here, this figure would be much more streamlined. But as is, he still looks and feels amazing. While I still have him handy, let's talk about his articulation. Despite the setbacks of the backpack, this figure moves amazing. Even in the legs, the range of motion isn't very inhibited at all. The head is on a ball joint and the wrists are on a swivel, so that allows for a lot of expressiveness. Just to nitpick this a little bit, I think the elbow joint needs to be down a little further in the forearm. He kind of has a thing going on where if you bend the arm, it looks like the bicep just disappears. It gives him that awkwardly long arm syndrome that Earthrise Wheeljack had too. But that's not to compare this guy's arms to Earthrise Wheeljack's. This figure is far superior in that aspect. Something that you don't see much in Transformers figures anymore is ball-jointed feet. It gives them a good range of motion in any direction and in any pose you might want to put them in. But now let's take a look at the figure that started it all. Bumblebee really made me hopeful to see some amazing articulation schemes, and honestly, he does not disappoint. The engineering in his ankles is absolutely amazing. He has an incredible ankle pivot. Are you shitting me? I kinda mentioned it in detail, but the kibble in his leg really does hinder articulation, and unfortunately he can only kick up that far. But from the waist up, he might as well be an MDLX figure. Fake butterfly joints that make this guy absolutely a joy to handle. The deepness of his elbow joint is absolutely insane. All of it combines into a figure that really makes me feel like I'm holding Bumblebee, a happy-go-lucky kid appeal character. But Bumblebee isn't the best out of the set. That award goes to Jazz. I'm not kidding when I say this figure is everything Studio Series 86 Jazz wishes it was. The amount of articulation in this guy is absolutely obscene. You can throw this guy into any pose and he'll look absolutely fantastic. This figure just feels cool. It feels smooth. It's nice to look at and handle. But of course, that's not all to these figures. And if you really want to spice up the articulation, he came with some of the best accessories in all of Generations. The gun is pretty basic, but the grappling hook is absolutely amazing. I love when Transformers come with accessories like this. I think he only used these twice in the original series, but it was enough for me to want them with the Jazz. But me being me, I made a wire connection for it. I clipped off a peg from a gun I wasn't using and fed the wire through that so it could connect into the spool piece, and just made the wire thick enough to fit into the end of the grapple. Dare I say, Jazz has never looked better. And of course, Jazz looks amazing with just the gun as well. On the topic of pretty cool accessories, Bumblebees are actually pretty neat. His gun has a pretty nice sculpt to it, but it is pretty generic and small. To me, the real winner here is definitely the jetpack. It has a bunch of amazing sculpted detail that I wish was more visible. It just being a black chunk of plastic doesn't help. And now Bumblebee can finally know what it's like to take flight, drenching Decepticons in an absolute barrage of bullets, outmaneuvering any seeker that tries to stand in his way. Truly a master in the skies. That is, until you realize the jetpack is meant for Kingdom Sideswipe or Earthrise Optimus. I almost forgot to talk about the energy rods, so I'm doing a few pickup shots here. Excuse the roughness, I'm sorry. Despite there being 5 of them, I am surprised I haven't lost any. I thought I did. I thought they were 6 at first, and I actually had to Google it before filming this. I love when Hasbro does this type of stuff. Give us more energy rods. Give us more energon cubes. Each of them is sculpted in a very nice translucent orange plastic with a little bit of metallic flaking in it. That metallic flaking really helps them stand out. I guess the biggest downfall of them is that they don't fit into any bot's hands. The tip is just too big. The bulbous ends of them are just too big to fit in any Transformers figure's hands, which really sucks. At least that was the case until Wheeljack came along. He has 3 clips on each side of his backpack, which allow for all of them to go somewhere besides the accessory bin. I really love this detail, especially when it comes to getting him in alt mode. I think it's just a really great touch that they put this in because no other figure can carry them in pretty much any way. And of course, that brings us to Wheeljack's accessories. First, let's take a look at his windshield shield. It is cast in a very nice dark blue purplish material. It's definitely coming off as more purple through the camera. And of course you can break it apart and connect it at these two pieces. Honestly, the clear plastic scares me and it's not worth it for a Cybertronian road. But that's not all for gimmicks of this thing. You can plug it into Wheeljack's back and give him butterfly wings. It's supposed to be like a glider, but the only thing it's gliding to is the accessory bin. Honestly, my favorite accessory with this guy has to be his fans. Now, they don't look like much at first. They are the blades or fans he used to get away from the Seekers in the first episode. If you were watching the live stream of this guy in March, you would know that they tried to make these act as Dominator discs from the G1 episode when they tried to take over Devastator. And that's why I love them so much. I truly love episode-specific accessories like this. And they just plug right into the forearms. Honestly, that completes the look for him in my opinion. Last but not least is his blaster. But I prefer to use it as his rocket launcher. It's cast in the seafoam green of his windshield, and obviously painted a little bit in silver. The reason I say it's his rocket launcher is because it looks more like his rocket launcher. I prefer to plug it in his shoulder where there's an actual port for it. Something I like to do from time to time is give him the Siege Ratchet Wheeljack. Are you shitting me? Sometimes I like to give him the wrench from Siege Ratchet. It just spruces him up a little bit. So, a basic synopsis of these figures is I love them. They're great episode accurate figures of characters that I really love. Looks that I've wanted for a very long time. Not only that, but they look amazing together as a set. And of course, their main draw is that they're Cybertronian. So, let's get into these guys' alt modes. We have the reason for these figures existing. These alt modes are so incredibly cool and just badass to look at, I can't pick a favorite. They're all very unique and special in their own way. I love Bumblebee's UFO design. It could have easily just been a standard UFO, but they went for more of like a flat, slimmer kind of look. And it works incredibly well. He feels extremely nice to hold, not loose or floppy at all. And of course, you get the transparent windshield. Overall, this mode is actually pretty badass. It just has a different aesthetic from other UFO transformers. Next up is Wheeljack. This mode is so incredibly chunky and large, it's hard to believe that that little Wheeljack figure transforms and bloats up this much. Again, I love the seafoam green here. The silver bar with the red and blue accents is absolutely amazing. I love that he has side windows as well. And of course you get the fans on his bumper. But those aren't the only accessories that belong on this alt mode. His stupid little glider thing folds up and goes onto his car mode. And there you can recreate the shield that he put up when the Seekers were firing at him in Bumblebee. It's my preferred look for this alt mode because without it, it does look kinda plain in my opinion. But as you probably know by now, these two go together in more than one way. Basically, why Wheeljack has so much kibble and why he's a very panel-heavy transformation, you kinda untransform him back here, and fold up Bumblebee's bits right here, and then you just slide Bumblebee right on in. While incredibly tight and pretty heavy with Bumblebee in there, looks incredibly good. It doesn't look like you have a whole nother figure in the back of him. I truly wasn't expecting for them to even try and pull this off or pull it off very successfully at all. But man, I love being proven wrong. And I'm not gonna lie, this makes these two figures beat out Jazz in alt mode just a little bit. But that's not to say Jazz's alt mode isn't fantastic. I love how small and compact it is. It just feels like it was made for speed. Again, no outline on the auto badge, but man, why do I keep complaining about that? I like that the arms kind of give it a little bit of elevation off of a table or any surface you put it on. And you could put blast effects in the back. Oh man, I just really love this alt mode. They're nice and chunky and sleek. Nice and sleek when they need to be, and big and chunky when they need to be. They do what they set out to do incredibly well, and honestly, you can't knock them for that. Let's get into my final thoughts. So for my final thoughts, these guys have to be some of the best Generations figures of all time. Bumblebee truly set a precedent for these Origins figures, and it shows. He's a perfect example of a small deluxe class figure being an absolute package. For Wheeljack, I was personally incredibly worried about this figure. I thought this guy would be an absolute disaster. Even when we got pictures of him, I still thought he would be kinda mid. The transformation is kinda cancer because it's so panel heavy, but I understand why with needing to put Bumblebee in the pack. And last but not least, we have Jazz. Jazz is undoubtedly and pretty obviously my favorite out of the set. I doubt that we could ever get a better Origins Jazz or just a better G1 Jazz in general. I know people meat ride the Studio Series 86 one, but to be honest, that figure is absolute garbage compared to this. My biggest issue with this figure is that it wasn't in my top 10 of 2023. And that leaves us with a great array of figures that are amazing to fantastic. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you want to see more and you haven't already, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Oh, motherfucker.